warm welcome to another video, guys. This time I'm gonna be covering my dear pet project that originally I think kind of began circa 2017 and 2018. I have some old photos of the first iteration, but the main kind of idea was that when I looked at this card, Hurricane Crawler, I knew that it could be broken somehow, and I wanted to figure out if there was an infinite loop, a combo loop that wins on the same turn you start looping in Duel Masters TCG. There had been some ideas revolving like manually looping Hurricane Crawler after Invincible technology and having a lot of mana, but all of the combos that I saw or got information of were not infinite. They most often ran into the problem of your hand size getting lower while you're looping, and since Hurricane Crawler puts the cards in your hand into the mana zone, then you pick that many cards up. If your hand size is depleting, say 15 cards first, then 14, 13, 12, you're essentially putting less mana untapped into your mana zone with each loop. So if you were facing a 200 card deck, if you were trying to, for example, loop /Charger or something, you wouldn't be able to do that. Anyway, back to the project. I decided to make this video after a long time because of a fellow community member who asked for a clarification on how the loop functions. So this video will not be as refined as the extreme loop video I made, although I did highlight my previous, which is this deck 2.0, Hurricane Crawler loop, and this one is with Mystic Dreamscape engine. I'll get to it later, while the less mana version was with Earth Ripper, but I came to the conclusion that that deck was just bad because you ended up playing so many dead cards, and overall it just pulled into weird directions. Like you're playing Beast Folk Baits, which, yeah, of course they can attack shields or they can trade into your opponent's aggro creatures, but it just kind of felt all over the place. Maybe one day, never say never. So, while I briefly mention how this deck functions, I'll just highlight the cards in the deck. So, this is a 60 card deck. Mainly, this is worked like I approached this from the angle of, if I'm going past 40 cards, which I'm very keen on normally, is that if you're keeping the ratios similar, you end up kind of minimizing the variance and the problem of having, like, you know, best card for a certain effect, and then the second one, like in 40 cards you always want to see Bronze Arm on turn 3, but if you're having multiple uses and you end up running stuff like my favorite card /Charger, you have some additional ramp routes, excuse me, to just kind of get the turn 3 ramp, for example. Originally this build was actually with 2 swaps because of the Finnish ban list, and I'm too used to it, but then I realized, oh yeah, I'm playing 60 cards, I'm playing unrestricted, let us just enjoy summer. So when you look at the cards in this list, you'll kind of figure out that the core itself does look and play a bit like a regular control list without fire. Some slight glare here. Here's /Charger, here's one clamp. Notably, like, even though it's 60 cards, you have a lot of ramp here, you have card draw, you have deck search with logic cubes and the crystal memory. You have Eureka Chargers, which function as a 2-for-1 in the sense of like ramping and filtering your hand towards your combo pieces. And notably also, I used to have 4 of these, but I decided to cut 2 in favor of the soul swaps, so Mystic Treasure Chest. And when you look at this deck, we can just kind of agree, like, yeah, there are some interesting cards like Jilwarka. I decided to put these in the 2.0 version because I used to have these in the original one as well. I didn't own Julianas back then. I don't think I had Belixes even. And Jilwarka was like when the meta was still playing stuff like wind axes and comet missiles and stuff, Jilwarka is actually surprisingly good. And although it's weaker and much weaker against Water Nature aggro because of the bounce when you compare it directly to Juliana, I feel like the card has some legs. But that's a discussion for another time. I think it's underutilized. If you're making meta reads on what opponents are playing, if your opponents are playing FN Rush, this card on average saves you 2 to 3 shields a turn. So, you know, not too bad. Anyway, now that you've seen the deck list, the main purpose of the deck is to get to the combo, which is infinite, so you get to loop it as many times as you want. Key cards here, being the last two highlighted, Mana Bonanza and Invincible Technology. While both of them are technically dead cards on their own, the Mana Bonanza here, since we have a lot of ramp, you have tools to slow down the game, and you can actually play this card really early. If your opponent is playing any sort of a mid-range deck or a slower control deck, oftentimes you get to do the Bonanza before they're able to do their haymakers. Like, yeah, sure, they can deploy Bronze Arm Tribe, Sky Sword, but with the amount of ramp this deck has, and Essence Self as well, oftentimes you're able to Lost Soul them first, or you get to play the Bonanza, be empty-handed, and yeah, your opponent turbo ramped as well, but they have one card after Lost Soul. So in those scenarios, your top decks on average are better. You get one Logic Cube, you can just win. Okay, so how does this function? Step 1, get to Bonanza without losing. Easier said than done, but let's just go with the flow for a bit. Notably, this sort of deck you wouldn't bring to a tournament if you're expecting a lot of FN Rush, for example. Now that we have that out of the way, if there's any sort of mid-ranges, Survivor stuff, Mana Burn stuff, technically this deck fares very well against those, because the Mana Burn cards are low-key irrelevant against you. If you're going for the Bonanza after Lost Soul, for example, or something, you just don't care about most of their top decks. Yeah, they have to win you with beats, but if they hit even a couple shields, start chipping at them, you have all the mana in the world to play cards, and you can just combo off and then win on the one turn that you're able to start looping or cast the technology. So the main reason why this deck is 60 cards is because if we play Bonanza and we want to play it either at 7 mana with Essence Self, so we go to 14 mana and 15 with our next charge next turn, or you go to 16 and then 17 on the next turn. When you have that many cards in your mana, you start with 10 cards on the field already, 5 in hand, 5 in shields. Then you'll do some simple math and you'll end up in the scenario where after Bonanza, the deck count, cards in deck you have, is very low. And what the combo needs is enough cards in hand to be able to infinitely reset the mana. So let's take a glimpse back at Hurricane Crawler. Upon entering, you put all cards from your hand into your mana zone. It notably doesn't say that they come in tapped, but rather they come in untapped as long as they're not double sieves. Notably, I did play Miraculous Plagues in my original version, and here they would probably be a worthwhile inclusion as well, but for the linear purpose of the deck, this is like the base template I want to kind of keep as the 2.0 and then refine it from there. Plague kind of just delays the inevitable. If you're casting Plague, you're oftentimes not being able to play Bonanza, and when you end up in these scenarios where, like, okay, I can use Plague and pass turn and then be top decking, it's not as effective here because there's no like combinations of you needing to hit the shields, you having Fortress Shells and stuff, which are key to the most recent deck I played in a tournament, which was the Mega Meet 2024, which I did win, which I am very happy about, in the Finnish restriction format. 5-0 in Swiss and then 3-0 in the top 8. Anyway, if we have, say, 15 cards in hand when we play Hurricane Crawler, you put 15 cards into your mana zone, and then you take 15 out of your mana. Well, what we do is, if we just imagine this being our mana zone for a bit, on the same turn, we have the mana, we play the technology, and then, for example, we soul swap the Hurricane Crawler out from our mana, it enters, and now, if we have, after technology, a big bunch of cards in our hand, we just put all of these aside from the multisieves, which Sky Swords are the only cards here. You put them into the mana, you take the tapped mana into your hand, and whatever the difference in the card count from the tapped cards you took, you just take the extra cards or whatever you need for the loop itself, and you end up in the scenario where you have all your mana available again, all the possible cards in your hand, and then you can play another Hurricane Crawler and keep going. Now, this does not yet answer the question what the main loop itself is. So, how do we win the game? It is a deck out loop. You cast /Charger an infinite amount of times, but there are some quite cute cards that you need overall, and let me just get those on the side as well. We need the /Chargers, obviously, which are the key cards, but here we are. For the time being, you first cast Bonanza, get mana, and on the following turn you cast Technology. So depending on the mana count, if you have an Essence Elf out and you cast this at 7, you'll be at 14 mana. You'll be at 15 if you charge a card. So with this costing 1 less, so 12. Notably and very conveniently, if you're at 14 mana, Technology and Soul Swap do in fact total at 14 mana, so you draw your deck aside from like one card. There are some notable exclusions here, like if you are shorter on mana, you don't have enough to loop or whatever, there is a small asterisk here where you might need to leave some cards in your mana to first cast, for example, Bronze Arm Tribe, to increase the card count in your mana, but those are very fringe scenarios. Just be mindful that sometimes you need it. Anyway, Technology, 28 cards into hand or whatever, and then you play Soul Swap, you Soul Swap a Hurricane Crawler out, and badam, now you can reset your mana and start sculpting the combo. So, after we played these, the cards the combo needs is, depending on the mana count you have, Essence Elves, 1 or 2, preferably 2, just to make it easier. On the first iteration, after you get all the cards you want into your hand, you have to find the Essence Elves first, most of the time. You can get them from the shields with Ghastly Drain, you can get them from your grave with Morbid Medicine. If they're in your mana zone, well, technically you get them with Hurricane Crawler, and if they're now in the mana zone, you can just Hurricane Crawler again and play them out. Because we have so many cards in hand, we don't need to care about losing one card at this stage, as long as we end up and maintain a hand size of, depending on the mana count, approximately 17 to 18. Could be less, could be more. The combo loop itself is after you've set these up. Now, the key part is to have, when we play the Hurricane Crawler, in order to make this combo infinite, you need to put the same number of cards from your hand on each Hurricane Crawler play as the previous one. Most of the old lists that people tinkered around with and were like, oh yeah, Technology, play Crawler and do whatever, they ended up going negative in cards in hand. So this didn't kind of solve the issue for me, which was, is there an infinite loop with Hurricane Crawler? Because if the card count in hand is getting smaller, you're not infinitely resetting your mana, and thus the loop isn't infinite. While it might win the game, it wasn't infinite, and that was what I was trying to hunt for. These are, quite frankly, the only cards you need. So, we have Hurricane Crawler out, we have the Essence Elves. You play a /Charger, you mill your opponent for 1, you play a /Charger, then you play a Mystic Dreamscape. Oops, the glare. You return 3 cards from your hand, from your mana to your hand. Let's just say it's the /Chargers +1. You play a Phal Eega, return the Dreamscape to your hand. Play an Abduction Charger, return Hurricane and Phal Eega to your hand, and then you play Hurricane Crawler and rinse and repeat. You might have actually noticed that even with just these cards in hand, it was already the same card count, but let us just imagine for a bit. These are the cards we need, and on top of that we have, say, 15 cards in hand. Notably at this stage, our mana zone does have, well, 15 or 17 cards. But, well, actually for the iteration purposes, let's just do this. $15 cards there. Alright. So this is the first iteration. Now we have still, say, 2 cards left in our deck. It doesn't really matter. But now we will first, after Hurricane Crawler has entered, we have now put our hand into the mana zone, which was the card count. Let's act like we were playing Bonanza. We're at 7 mana, so we are currently at 15 mana. First, we can just increase the mana count if we want to by playing 2/Chargers, then playing a Hurricane Crawler. So, with, for example, that mana count, you first go for a /Charger, then you use that /Charger to play another /Charger. You tap that one and a blue mana for Mystic Dreamscape, return 3 cards to your hand. You then tap 5 more mana to play Phal Eega, returning the Mystic Dreamscape. You then tap 5 mana, including a blue mana, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for Abduction Charger on Hurricane and Phal Eega. And then finally, you tap 5 mana for Hurricane Crawler. And now we currently have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 29 cards in our hand. We put 29 to the mana. We take the previous mana to our hand, so 25 cards, just bear with me for a moment. 25, so we need to take 25 back. 5, 10, 15, 20, so 28 it was. 1, 2, do we have any combos? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, these cards come to our hand, and these in the mana. Notably here, you could be sculpting so that the colors are better, but doesn't really matter. And now we can see, for the first loop we had 17 mana, now we have 17 mana untapped, and the card count should be 28, so 3, 8, 13, 18, 23, and 28. Now, 28 cards in hand, as it was previously. Let us do the loop once more, and if at the end of this loop, when we replay the Hurricane Crawler, if we have 28 cards in hand, we're able to infinitely loop this, because we're always able to reset all of our mana by putting 28 cards there, taking 28 out, and rinse and repeat. We start off with the /Charger. 1 mana here for /Charger, opponent loses 1 card. We use that one for another /Charger, opponent loses 1. We tap that one and another, so 2 mana for the Mystic Dreamscape. Mystic Dreamscape, return 3 cards to your hand. Then you tap 5 mana for Phal Eega. With Phal Eega, you return the Mystic Dreamscape to your hand. Then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Abduction Charger. You use it on 2 of your creatures here, so Phal Eega and Hurricane. And finally, with 1 mana left over, you play Hurricane Crawler, and our hand size should now be 28, and if it is, we'll be able to combo this infinitely, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 28. So, rinse and repeat, your opponent gets decked out, and you win the game. You might ask why these pieces, why this combo, blah blah blah. Well, the cute thing here is that this was actually the first combination of cards that made the loop infinite. With the main key here being maintaining your hand size so that you're able to, you know, have the same card count with each Hurricane Crawler cast. Let's imagine that our hand count is n here. So with the first play of /Charger, or actually we can just illustrate it this way. We just need one card in mana to just act like it's there. So n-1 /Charger, n-2 /Charger, Mystic Dreamscape, you return 3. So card count is currently n. You then play Phal Eega, returning Mystic Dreamscape to your hand. We're still n. Then you play Abduction Charger, we're n+1, so currently 6 cards. And then you play the Hurricane Crawler, and now you're back at n. So I'll just do it one more time. Card count in hand 5, 4, 3, 5, 5, 6, and 5. This acts like cards in your mana zone. This is just to illustrate the main point. Now the thing about this deck, which I think makes it maybe even better than Extreme Loop. Extreme Loop has some conditions that need to be met, and I think oftentimes the shields not being hit and being able to find your combo pieces can be a little bit of a stretch, even though the combo itself is really compact because of Rumbling Terrorhorn. Actually, currently I've been tinkering around with the idea of Live and Breathe in there, because that works as yet another combo piece. For example, when you play Live and Breathe, then you go for an Ancient Horn, you find another one, you have untapped mana, then you play Extreme Crawler, return those, you can play the Ancient Horn. Now you have all of those pieces and you just need a Terra Horn or whatever, so it's interesting. Anyway, the pieces themselves in this deck, the dead cards here are essentially the Hurricane Crawlers, the Bonanza, and the Invincible Technology. Aside from those cards, technically this deck is just a Sun's Fire control list, and I think that's what makes it really interesting. Sure, Abduction Charger is not optimal, like oftentimes you'd rather play Plague, but when we're considering the utilization of this card, you can curve into this, you can use this on one of your opponent's creatures and your own Phal Eega or Sky Sword or whatever. You can just bounce 2 of your Sky Swords, or you can bounce 2 of your opponent's creatures to slow them down. All of these tools. Mystic Dreamscape is a fine card, it's a trigger, you don't have to return 3 cards, it's up to 3. You can retrieve, say, a Sky Sword or Soul Swap or whatever you need. /Chargers here work as both ramp tools, being able to get rid of your opponent's most crucial things against this deck, for example, say Lost Soul, Cranium Clamp, or in terms of like FN Rush, maybe Pyro Fighter. And then obviously Phal Eega is just an absolutely amazing card. And notably, since we do play quite a bit of 3-drops, if you're playing against an aggro, oftentimes you can just slam the Hurricane Crawler. Say you have 4 cards left in hand, you can put those into the mana, get the 3-drop, and then you can play that as well. Sometimes you can play 2 Hurricane Crawlers, sometimes you can go Hurricane and Sky Sword, stabilize, then you have a big 4k beater to just slam their thing, and you get the idea. Card considerations for this list, the Plagues I mentioned before, Vampire Sylphie, more triggers, but the main kind of principle for me here is that you're not really able to trust your triggers in this deck, because you're playing 60 cards. If you dilute it with more terror pits and stuff, you end up with a clunkier deck where, sure, you find a terror pit, but you're not finding your win conditions and stuff. But this was a nice little unrefined video of sorts. I hope this clarifies what the deck aims to do, how the combo itself works, and stuff like that. Please do comment on this one. I love to talk about this deck. Making videos is a bit time consuming, but I felt like this video was needed. And within 2-ish, 3-ish months, I'll be making a collection video after we've moved cities and settled down in the new home. But without further ado, thanks so much for watching. This deck actually, there's something I need to, like, okay, small story time. When I wondered about this, if I can make an infinite loop or something, it actually came to me like the missing piece. I was quite fevery, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, Mystic Dreamscape. Oh my god, that is it. Like, the first idea was, oh wow, Bonanza, I need mana, that's so perfect, and then I can technology, and then with technology I can do whatever. But the thing that I ended up in was the same scenario many people when looking at Hurricane Crawler and other, like, yeah, if I have all cards from my deck in my hand, how do I win? No infinite combo was created aside from, you know, those ancient horn loops that had some other requirements, but quite frankly, Mystic Dreamscape was the card that I was missing, because in TCG there's not that many cards that return enough cards from your mana zone to your hand. So it needs to be 3 cards or more in order to have a higher hand size or the same when you play the Hurricane Crawler. This was the reason why Earth Ripper loop was possible. Now that I speak out loud, I'm sure that Diamondia could be used similarly, even though it's like, it would be in a weird territory. Oh man, Snow Fairy Crawler loop. Maybe I need to do that too. But anyway, that was the missing link, and then I just figured that I'm just smiling here. These memories are really priceless to me, and they were good times, and so are the current times as well. But yeah, without further reminiscing, I'll happily talk more. This deck was and is my baby. I always loved infinite combos and creating some stuff that's like unexplored, so I am happy about this. And it's one of the reasons why I have so many Hurricane Crawlers. And I still haven't gotten past my inability to say crawler properly a plethora of times. Goddamn Earth Eaters. Anyway, on that note, try the deck out, enjoy it, justice to Earth Eaters, make them easier to pronounce. Just call it Hurricane Loop and enjoy your summer. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.